Chapter 3. Winston was dreaming of his mother. He thought he must have been 10 or 11 years old when his mother disappeared. She was a tall, silent woman with slow movements and beautiful fair hair. He remembered his father more vaguely as dark and thin, always dressed in neat dark clothes. Winston especially recalled the very thin soles of his father's shoes and his spectacles. They had likely been caught up in one of the early purges of the 50s. In his dream, his mother was in some place deep below him, holding his young sister. He did not remember his sister, except as a weak, silent baby with large, watchful eyes. Both looked up at him from below. They were in a dark place, perhaps the bottom of a well or a very deep grave, but it was a place that was moving downwards. They were in a sinking ship, looking up at him through the darkening water. There was still air in the ship. They could see him, and he could see them, but they were sinking deeper into the green water that would soon hide them forever. He was in the light and air while they were being pulled down to death, and they were down there because he was up here. He knew this, and they knew it too. He saw that knowledge in their faces. There was no blame in their expressions, only the understanding that they must die for him to survive. And this was part of how things had to be. He did not remember how it had happened, but he knew in his dream that somehow the lives of his mother and sister had been sacrificed for his own. It was one of those dreams that, while maintaining the typical dreamlike quality, continued his intellectual life, revealing facts and ideas that felt new and valuable even after waking. What suddenly struck Winston was that his mother's tragic death nearly 30 years ago was something that could no longer happen. He realized that tragedy belonged to ancient times, to a time when there was still privacy, love, and friendship. Families supported one another without needing to explain. His mother's memory hurt him, because she had died loving him when he was too young and selfish to love her back. Somehow, he didn't remember how, she had sacrificed herself to a sense of loyalty that was private and unchanging. Such things, he understood, could not happen today. Today there was fear, hatred, and pain, but no dignity of emotion, no deep or complex sorrows. He saw all of this in the large eyes of his mother and sister, looking up at him through the green water, hundreds of fathoms deep and still sinking. Suddenly, he stood on springy grass on a summer evening, as the slanting rays of the sun illuminated the ground. The landscape around him appeared so often in his dreams that he was never quite sure whether he had really seen it before. In his waking thoughts, he called it the Golden Country. It was an old, worn pasture with a footpath winding across it, and a few molehills scattered here and there. In the ragged hedge across the field, the elm trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves rustling like women's hair. Nearby, though out of sight, there was a clear, slow-moving stream, where dace swam in the pools beneath the willow trees. A girl with dark hair approached them across the field. With a swift motion, she took off her clothes and tossed them aside. Her body was white and smooth, but he felt no desire. In fact, he barely glanced at it. What struck him in that instant was his admiration for the way she had tossed her clothes aside. With its grace and ease, it seemed to erase an entire culture, a whole way of thinking, as if Big Brother, the party, and the thought police could all be wiped away by that single, beautiful movement of her arm. That too belonged to the ancient times. Winston woke up with the word Shakespeare on his lips. The telescreen emitted a loud whistle that continued for 30 seconds. It was 7:15, time for office workers to get up. Winston pulled himself out of bed, naked because a member of the outer party received only 3,000 clothing coupons each year, and a pair of pajamas cost 600, and grabbed a dirty singlet and a pair of shorts from a chair. The physical jerks would start in 3 minutes. Just then, a violent coughing fit hit him, one that often followed waking up. It emptied his lungs so completely that he could only start breathing again by lying on his back and taking deep breaths. His veins swelled from the effort, and his varicose ulcer began to itch. 30 to 40 group, shouted a sharp female voice. 30 to 40 group, take your places please. 30s to 40s. Winston snapped to attention in front of the telescreen, on which appeared the image of a youngish woman, scrawny yet muscular, dressed in a tunic and gym shoes, arms bending and stretching. She barked. Follow my lead. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on, comrades, put some energy into it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The pain from the coughing fit had not fully pushed the memory of his dream from his mind, and the rhythmic movements of the exercise helped bring it back. As he moved his arms back and forth mechanically, he wore the grim look that was expected during the physical jerks, while he struggled to remember the dim details of his early childhood. It was extremely hard. Everything beyond the late 50s blurred. Without outside records to refer to, even the outlines of his own life lost their clarity. He remembered major events that may not have actually happened, and he recalled details of incidents without grasping their emotions, leaving long gaps that he could not fill. Everything had been different then. Even the names and shapes of countries on the map had changed. Airstrip 1, for example, had not been called that back then. It was known as England or Britain, though he felt fairly certain that London had always been called London. Winston could not clearly recall a time when his country was not at war, but it was clear that there had been a long period of peace during his childhood. One of his early memories was of an air raid that seemed to catch everyone off guard. Perhaps it was when the atomic bomb fell on Colchester. He did not remember the raid itself, but he could recall his father's hand gripping his own as they rushed down deep into the earth, spiraling down a staircase that echoed under his feet. They eventually became so tired that he started to whine, and they had to stop and rest. His mother was following behind in her slow, dreamy manner. She was carrying his baby sister, or maybe just a bundle of blankets. He wasn't sure if his sister had been born then. Finally, they emerged into a noisy, crowded place that he recognized as a tube station. People sat all over the stone floor, while others packed closely together on metal bunks, stacked one above the other. Winston and his parents found a spot on the floor. Nearby, an old man and an old woman sat side by side on a bunk. The old man wore a decent dark suit and a black cloth cap pushed back from very white hair. His face was red, and his blue eyes brimmed with tears. He smelled strongly of gin, which seemed to seep from his skin instead of sweat. One might think that the tears in his eyes were pure gin. Although he was slightly drunk, he was also burdened by a genuine and painful grief. In his childish way, Winston sensed that something terrible, something unforgivable and irreparable, had just happened. He also felt that he knew what it was. Someone the old man loved, a little granddaughter perhaps, had been killed. Every few minutes, the old man kept repeating, "We didn't ought to have trusted 'em. I said so, Ma, didn't I? That's what comes from trusting 'em. I said so all along. We didn't ought to have trusted the buggers." But which buggers they shouldn't have trusted, Winston could not remember. Since that time, war had been continuous, but technically, it had not always been the same war. During his childhood, there had been confusing street fighting in London that he remembered vividly. However, tracing the history of that time to identify who was fighting whom would have been impossible, because no written or spoken record ever acknowledged any alliances other than the current one. At that moment in 1984, if it was 1984, Oceania was at war with Eurasia and aligned with Eastasia. No public or private statement ever admitted that the three powers had previously been grouped differently. In reality, as Winston well knew, just 4 years had passed since Oceania was at war with Eastasia and allied with Eurasia. But that was merely something he knew, because his memory was not under complete control. Officially, the shift in alliances had never happened. Oceania was at war with Eurasia, therefore Oceania had always been at war with Eurasia. The enemy of the moment always represented absolute evil, and any past or future agreement with him was impossible. The frightening thing, Winston thought for the 10,000th time as he painfully forced his shoulders back, was that it might all be true. If the party could reach into the past and declare that some event never happened, that would be more frightening than mere torture or death. The party claimed that Oceania had never allied with Eurasia. Winston Smith knew that Oceania had been allied with Eurasia just 4 years ago. But where did that knowledge exist? Only in his mind, which would soon be destroyed. If everyone accepted the lie the party imposed, if all records told the same story, then that lie would become history and turn into truth. Who controls the past, the party's slogan said, controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. However, while the past could be changed, it had never actually been altered. What was true now had always been true. It was straightforward. All that was needed was an endless series of victories over your own memory. They called it reality control. In Newspeak, it was doublethink. Stand easy, the instructress said a bit more kindly. Winston let his arms drop to his sides and slowly filled his lungs with air. His mind drifted into the confusing realm of doublethink. To know and not to know. To be aware of complete truthfulness while telling carefully crafted lies. To hold two contradictory opinions at once, knowing they opposed each other and believing in both. To use logic against logic. To reject morality while claiming it. To believe that democracy was impossible while thinking the party protected democracy. To forget whatever needed forgetting, then to bring it back to mind when necessary, and then quickly forget it again. Above all, to apply this process to the process itself. That was the ultimate trick. To consciously create unconsciousness, and then to forget the act of hypnosis you just performed. Even understanding the word doublethink required doublethink. The instructress called for their attention again. And now let's see who can touch their toes, she said excitedly. Right over from the hips, please, comrades. 1, 2, 1, 2. Winston hated this exercise. It sent sharp pains from his heels to his butt, and often ended with another coughing fit. The half-pleasant feeling faded from his thoughts. He realized that the past had not just changed. It had truly been erased. How could you establish even the simplest fact if there was no record outside your memory? He tried to recall when he first heard about Big Brother. He thought it might have been in the 60s, but he wasn't sure. In the party histories, Big Brother was portrayed as the leader and protector of the revolution from its very beginning. His deeds had been pushed back in time until they reached the incredible world of the 40s and 30s, when capitalists, wearing strange cylindrical hats, still drove through London in shiny cars or horse-drawn carriages with glass sides. There was no way to know how much of this story was real and how much was made up. Winston couldn't even remember when the party itself had started. He believed he had never heard the word ingsoc before 1960. However, it was possible that in its older form, English socialism, it had been in use earlier. Everything blurred together in his mind. Sometimes he could identify a clear lie. For example, it was not true, as the party history books claimed, that the party had invented airplanes. He had remembered airplanes since he was a child, but he could prove nothing. There was never any proof. Once in his life he had held undeniable evidence of a historical lie. And on that occasion, "Smith," yelled the harsh voice from the telescreen. 6079 Smith W. Yes, you. Bend lower, please. You can do better than that. You're not trying. Lower, please. That's better, comrade. Now stand at ease, the whole squad, and watch me. A sudden hot sweat broke out over Winston's body. His face stayed completely blank. Never show fear, never show anger. Even a slight flicker of the eyes could get you in trouble. He stood and watched as the instructor raised her arms above her head, not gracefully, but with impressive neatness and efficiency, bent over, and tucked the first joints of her fingers under her toes. There, comrades. That's how I want to see you do it. Watch me again. I'm 39 and I've had 4 children. Now look. She bent over again. You see, my knees aren't bent. You can all do it if you want to, she added as she stood back up. Anyone under 45 can definitely touch their toes. We may not all get to fight on the front lines, but at least we can stay fit. Remember our boys on the Malabar front, and the sailors in the floating fortresses. Just think about what they have to endure. Now try again. That's better, comrade. That's much better, she said encouragingly as Winston, with a sudden effort, managed to touch his toes with straight knees for the first time in several years. If you like our recordings, consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel, so you don't miss any more audiobooks. And next part coming soon. Till then, take care, bye.